We're talking about sustainability as it applies to your applied fall fertilizer. What can you do to maximize your fertilizer investment and still be sustainable? That's the subject in today's Cutting the Curve.
Welcome to XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve podcast, where real farmers share real insights and real results to help you improve your farming operation. This episode is brought to you by Simon Innovation. Protect your crops and maximize yields with a full lineup of innovative precision tools engineered to enhance the efficiency and accuracy of your sprayer. Visit simoninnovations.com and start getting more ROI out of your sprayer. And now, here's your host, Damian Mason.
Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of Cutting the Curve here. I got a great one for you today. I've got Kelly Garrett, one of the founders of XtremeAg, and I've got Scott Lay with Agricen. We're talking about sustainability and your dry fertility program. You hear a lot from the guys about doing what you can to wean off of such massive amounts of applied dry fertilizer and then using applied liquid fertilizer through the season. That doesn't mean that we don't still utilize dry fertility programs. Obviously, we have to. It makes sense. Also, it probably fits into your program. We're heading into fall. You probably are starting to think about the fall applied fertilizer. How can you maximize its application? How can you also make sure that it's sustainable? Because you know what? For years, we flung fertilizer out there and it didn't get all the benefit that we should have gotten out of it. What if I told you we can do all of that and also be budget conscious? Because let's face it, we're in a low commodity environment. All right. The product that you're talking about is a product called Titan XC, but that's not really the story here, Kelly. It's really about what you can do to be sustainable and also get your fertility where it needs to be, when it needs to be there. You're throwing fertilizer out there in September, October, November, and I expect it to not be utilized until May. How does this work?
Well, it can be tied up in the soil, Damian, especially the phosphorus. Especially here in Western Iowa, we have base saturation calcium problems. We can have high mag problems that can push the potassium out of the way and tie up the phosphorus. A product like Titan keeps it more available. And what we're really about is how lean can we run the agronomy and become more sustainable, lower our CI score, and increase profitability at the same time.
There's going to be a bunch of pushback on where I can spend my money, Scott Lay. Sub $4 corn, $9 range soybeans. It makes every producer say, okay, I can't go without the seed. I need the acres. I got to pay the cash rent. Where can I back off? And it's always about inputs. A fertilizer coating seems like a smart way to save money. Like, I'm going to still put out the fertilizer, but I'm not going to treat it because that'll save me a few bucks. How would you respond if I sat at the table and told you that was my strategy to get to break even or above?
Damian, the first thing I would say is, in the interest of full disclosure, I understand that algebra that goes into crop inputs and understanding the economics for the 2025 season, because I too come from a farm operation. So I not only I fully understand that. I think what we would begin to think about, you talked about it earlier in the beginning, where it needs to be and when it needs to be there. So the objective is still whether we're applying a full replacement rate of P&K, as perhaps you would under normal economic conditions, or something, a reduced rate. The objective becomes, how do we get more in a plant available form that Kelly referenced before? So I think, again, could a grower not apply any dry P or K and still raise a crop next year? Absolutely. The challenge is, and I think we all recognize this, there is a longer term consequence to doing that in terms of diminishing your soil P and K level. So how do we find that balance of not completely depleting the proverbial bank while being budget conscious and trying to maximize productivity for the 2025 season?
Aren't most at this day and age, here we are, fall 24, recording this, aren't we at a point where almost all dry fertility gets treated because we understand that 1 + 1 equals more than 2?
Unfortunately, no. And again, as we talk about Titan, we're talking specifically about phosphorus and potash. If we were talking about dry urea or liquid UAN, certainly a higher percent of nitrogen is treated to prevent loss. But as it relates to P and K, unfortunately, a lot of folks, spread the rocks. And obviously, that's a bit of a diminishing term. Those fertilizer pills out and hope for the best. But the fact is, applying the rocks, the fertilizer prills on whether it's fall or spring, that's simply step one in the equation.
Okay.
Step two that a lot of folks ignore, and let me fit, is how do we get more in a plant available form? That's the critical part I think we need to talk about.
All right, so let's talk about both of those things. All right, well, so spreading rocks. Kelly made the point. Here he is in Iowa. I'm over here in Indiana. I think you're in you're in Illinois, right? So, hence, by the way, dear listener, if you're listening, you can't see this. If you're watching on Acres TV or on there's a Dick Butkus bobblehead behind his shoulder, and I say, fine tradition of defensive players up there. Mike Singletary in my era, loved watching that guy. All right. What do we got here? We got two things. We're spreading out the rocks. We're putting that out there. It does seem interesting that for years we flung that stuff out there after the combine is out of the field, and we expect it to be there in May, June, and July. It does seem kind of like, here it is, the year 2024. Surely to God we can do better. Are we really not putting some kind of treatment on all these fertility products that we put out in fall?
They're not. A lot of farmers aren't doing it. They're skeptical. I believe Titan would be one of the things that would fall into the snake oil category in the typical coffee shop. And it's because of a lack of education. And I would talk to farmers and say, you need to educate yourself on what happens in your soil. I've got a book laying right here on my desk next to me, When Weeds Talk. And it's very much outside the box thinking, things like that. And there's one agronomist talks about doing studies. And they talk about, in the best case scenario, dry fertility will stay available in your soil for up to 90 days. In a tough base saturation area or tough scenario, it might only be a few hours. And this is exactly what Titan is talking about. That study shows you right there the effects that the soil can have on that dry fertility. And so we need to take steps to make that fertility available and to make sure that we're not wasting those input dollars, especially when you're talking $4 December corn.
Is that really what the pitch is? Because it seems to me, at this day and age, of course, I've learned a lot agronomically, Scott, since I joined these guys. But if I've got light, sandy soils, and I'm flinging out the rocks, as you say, unprotected, untreated in October, November, I don't have a ghost chance in hell that those fertility numbers are still going to be there in May when I need them. Am I right?
You're not wrong, unfortunately. And again, phosphorus is, and Kelly referenced it earlier, there's a multitude of factors that limit the availability of phosphorus: organic matter, soil type, pH, clay content in the soil. So all we're trying to do, and phosphorus, unfortunately, is highly inefficient. It's also highly needed in the crop. So if it's only 20 to 30% available in year one, how can we marginally increase that availability so the plant has a greater opportunity to increase soil levels and plant tissue levels that lead to yield?
Benefit of Titan XC is that it keeps the product around longer, but it also makes it more available when the time should come.
Correct.
So if you're looking at a fertility spend, and this is where Kelly has been big on this, if you are going to cut back, does something like this allow you to cut back?
Yes, this allows you to cut back because it's more available. You can become more efficient, and you can work on things like that.
How much would you consider cutting back? You did a nitrogen reduction study we talk about a lot, in case a listener has never heard us before, where you went down, 20% less, 50% less, and you went down to a complete reduction of elimination.
Nitrogen, I cut it all the way to zero, and that was $143 an acre loser versus what we consider the grower standard practice of 180. But we also had trials out there. This is on anhydrous pounds per acre. Again, 180 was the grower standard practice, 60, 120, 180, and 240 pounds of anhydrous. And the 60 through 240, all rates replicated 3 times. So really 12 trials, 12 samples, all yielded within 5 bushel of each other. I think we're grossly over applying nitrogen. I think we're probably grossly over applying dry fertility. I apologize to Scott. Ag Retail doesn't like it when I say that. But if you educate yourself and really get into the details and know what you can figure out to gain efficiency, and you said earlier that we talk about that too much, but gain efficiency to maximize our ROI, and a product like Titan really helps because we're making the fertility more available. And the Titan is less expensive than the dry fertility. What a wonderful tool.
Well, I guess I think it's kind of fun. This is a matter, I get it, of syntax and whatever. But when we say efficiency gets pounded in your head everywhere in agriculture, I like, in terms of, since we're talking about sustainability, I think utilization. When I start sitting through some of your agronomy sessions and I hear that we're only getting 30% of applied fertility into the plant, I think, good God. Let's talk about utilization. Any other business, if you threw 30% of a cost of goods out and got, or sorry, 100% out and got 30% return, you'd be like, what the hell's going wrong? Let's fix the warehouse. I mean, something's wrong here.
Walmart wouldn't go for that, would they?
Yeah, Walmart wouldn't go for that. We accept it.
I agree, and we accept it. I know. So let's find a way to not put out as much, in this example, dry fertility, and get a bigger utilization of it. There's the term of the day.
Yeah, I like utilization. Scott, here's the thing. So using Kelly's nitrogen study, again, that's the next boogeyman. We think regulation, and we're going to get to the question about regulation, because in my opinion, and I've been around this ag thing for a couple of days, in my projection is that in the next 5 years, we are absolutely going to see nutrient management plans on every farm in this country, just like the dairyman that has a huge dairy operation that rents my farm ground. He has to have a nutrient management plan as it pertains to his manure lagoons. And good God, he's got people out there in hazmat suits watching him. That day is coming for fertility, period. So we're talking about getting ahead of the curve, hence cutting the curve here. But nitrogen is the new boogeyman. Your product doesn't treat nitrogen, but what do you think's next? After nitrogen is going to be phosphorus, I think, in particular.
Phosphorus is as big a boogeyman as nitrogen. If you go to the Great Lakes, if you go to temples, things like that, phosphorus is also the boogeyman. And you have to figure out how to utilize more of it, because you can't be gone.
Scott, I know that you've got to be careful about the stand you take on the regulatory environment that's coming, but products that maximize utilization, which thereby reduces applied, we never worried about it because A, there wasn't the pressure and the scrutiny environmentally, and B, it was cheap. Now more than ever, it's got an environmental and an economic play on how I can reduce applied fertility, right?
That's absolutely right. And I think, and again, what rate can P&K be, pounds applied be reduced and still, attain a positive ROI? That's a bit open for debate. But what I can tell you is we've done, again, the product, the technology has been available for 12 years. We've sold it from coast to coast, in fact, in South America, Canada, and Australia as well. So we have a pretty good understanding of where that inflection point is. And what I can tell you, if we reduce whatever the recommended remote removal rates of P&K would be, by reducing that rate by only 10%, we achieve a number of trials, about a 6 to 7 bushel advantage in corn. We've got other instances where, just for the sake of understanding, reduced or compared that to a double the rate of fertilizer, the yields are the same. So, and Kelly said it well. Titan's not magic, but it does cost less on a per acre per ton basis than what fertilizer does. And if it makes your phosphorus and potash more available in the long run, we're doing something positive for the environment as well as the yield.
Okay, well, the regulation is coming, and we're going to get that in a second. But just to use your example, you sent something so that I could look at some numbers. Kelly and I both like graphs, and they're good here. You showed example here of 182 bushels per acre using 100 pounds of P and 120 pounds of K. Then you used half that rate and stayed. You were a bushel shy of that. So is this what I'm to take from this example, is that I can cut my rate in half and still maintain almost the identical yield?
You could take that from that, but again, there is a longer term consequence, perhaps, in terms of diminishing that bank of P&K. But that 50% reduction was an extreme example, no pun intended, with XtremeAg, but an extreme example to try to understand how far can we reduce the rate while not sacrificing yield.
Kelly, when you've been carrying the torch of we've overapplied nitrogen since I think I met you, I get Scott's point that using this example that, we might end up mining the soil. You say, I don't really think that it's been an accusation from the coffee shop crowd forever that they're out there mining the soil. You think it's way less of a reality than it is a statement.
Scott and I have grown very close over the last couple of years, so this pains me to say it, but I think it's bullshit. And we're not mining the soil. The soil's out of balance. Well, I say that. That's not true everywhere. If you go to Chad soils or Matt soils, we would talk about those soils are destructive, not constructive. But in the Midwest, we have constructive soils. I do believe that we need to put on some maintenance levels of fertility. I absolutely do. But I don't know that I would subscribe to having to build it. And I would also tell you now that the more and more research I do and education I get, we talk, like the example in that paper there, that's the very beginning of an inset program that we're starting to look at with regenerative root solutions and things like that. And I would tell you that, though, I wouldn't say like, let's just cut back 50% on the fertility. Let's cut back on the dry fertility and put on, that example there's basically showing, what would happen if we put on 200 pounds of MAP and potash versus 100 pounds of MAP and potash. And I would tell you that reduction right here, I did it on my board, that reduction in that example saved the grower $55 an acre in today's fertilizer market, and it lowers their CI score 2 points. And then I would tell you to take that $55 and I would tell you to spend approximately $25 on it in a foliar program when you put your fungicide on. Fertilizing in the R stages, to me, is much more important and a much bigger ROI than fertilizing in the vegetative stages. We talk about spoon feeding nitrogen all the time. We don't talk enough about spoon feeding P and K. So, Scott doesn't necessarily want to support it. He wants to talk about the long-term effects of cutting it back. He's not 100% wrong. I'm also not supporting that. I'm telling you there's a sustainable effect, there's a financial effect, and there's an agronomic effect if we take some of that $55 and spend half of it in a foliar program in the R stages. And I believe there's an even bigger ROI to get them.
Scott, there's going to be, the word sustainability has been tossed around for more than a decade in agriculture. And I, a long time ago said, well, by the way, sustainable also has a financial component. It's neat to talk about this, but if the numbers don't work, if an agricultural enterprise does not remain solvent, it sure as hell can't be sustainable. I think that this is a year when we've got 40% declines projected from 2022 farm income to start talking about both sustainabilities, solvency equals sustainability as well as environmental sustainability. And I think that's the best story about something like this, a product that makes, you've been using dry fertility for since grandpa, right? Since sometime after World War II. Now let's talk about making it more sustainable in terms, and when you say that, you got to tell the farmer, this doesn't just mean I'm out here hugging trees. Sustainable is also financial solvency. Is that the right approach?
I think it absolutely is. And something Kelly said that I agree with 100%. Again, the farm gate economics are materially different than they were a year ago. No one disputes that. So as we scrutinize every input expenditure, how are there instances where we can generate a savings in one part of the operation or in input expenses and apply those real savings, redeploy those to an expenditure that increases productivity in season? And I think Kelly's right. How can we rebalance how we're allocating our input expenses to get a greater result?
You brought up environmental or sustainability programs, Kelly. You obviously are at the forefront of this. You're the first guy to sell carbon credits. It's how you and I met. We can go on and on about that. Am I right on the nutrient management plan? And then eventually, if we are right that U.S. Department of Agriculture, to get crop insurance to be involved in any program, you have to also have a fertility or a nutrient management plan, et cetera. Do things like fertilizer treatments play into that? Just kind of like, I think of to the old days, nitrogen stabilizer products. You know what? You've got to use this because it reduces nitrogen application and also nitrogen, volatilization, et cetera. Is this the next wave and it'll be required?
Yes, I don't think it's a big stretch to say that at all. We've got inset programs now that Titan has looked at as sustainable. We've got we work with ARVA, and Titan is an example of a sustainable measure that you can take to be involved in inset programs. With regenerative roots, we're working on more of those programs right now. You look at Temple, interestingly enough, like that example there of that 50-60, Temple can only put on 52 pounds of phosphorus throughout the whole year. Mm-hmm. So like that example, there's a real world example of what Scott's literature that he sent us was. And then you think about in my hills, we have the HEL ground, highly erodible land, and the conservation program that I've got to farm in these hills right now. I don't think it's a far stretch to talk about the nutrient management plan we've got. My neighbors with hogs are already dealing with that, and they can only put that on right now. Why do you think that's not going to come to the rest of agriculture? Why do you think it's not going to get more strict? Look at what's going on in Nebraska right now with the nitrogen in the water. That's being introduced into the Nebraska legislature right now. And I think that senator asked for $100 million, and she got it all the way down. And to get that program through, she got $1 million to go do that on a few acres. And when that data comes back, if there's nitrogen in the water, that will have national implications.
Also, and it's an interesting thing. Scott, we're all Corn Belt guys, right? But the inclination, the first inclination, say that'll never happen here. That's a California thing. That's an East Coast thing. Well, Kelly, you're in Iowa, and I started hearing 3 years ago about the 3 counties, the Des Moines River, and it went straight
Webster County, Iowa.
Straight to attributing the fertility from farms. They didn't go down the road to some nickel cadmium battery plant. They came right to agriculture, and that's in Iowa.
That's absolutely correct.
Get me out of here, Scott. I think this is cool. By the way, 100 millionth acre for Titan XC. Titan XC has been on treated fertility products that went out over 100 million acres. So obviously, it's. I don't think you get to 100 million acres in 12 years by being ineffective. Answer me this: for the person that's sitting there saying, "Yeah, I don't know if this is the year because of the money," you already said this is the reason that you should do it.
I would say exactly that. For those that perhaps have not used the technology before, the driving reason to utilize this product in a year like this is the fact there's $4 December corn and $10 November beans. The efficiency of applied nutrients becomes even more critical as the bottom line or the economics tighten.
And the two words I tossed to you, Kelly, were sustainable. Well, we all know sustainability, but utilization. I think this is the story. Probably, it's cute to say it's just going to be that these commodity prices for right here and right now. Well, I've never seen just a 3-month downturn in commodity prices, and I don't think you have either. So I think sustainability and utilization of resources is going to be probably at the forefront for the next foreseeable future.
Unfortunately, when we have $6 corn, a typical grower's fertilizer approach is the more on method. Let's put more on. Yeah. And now when we have $4 futures, people are looking for ways to save money and use these lessons and keep them. Why wouldn't you use a lesson that you lose in $4 corn to save $55 an acre and keep that during $6 corn? I've never met anybody with too much money. And let's keep using these utilization practices, efficiency practices. Let's keep that ROI as high as possible. Titan works. The greatest example I've ever seen with Titan, Chad Henderson had a strip till trial, replicated 3 times. It was a great trial. Terrible drought that year. It was 2 years ago in Alabama. And Chad had a 17 bushel yield response in 80 bushel corn. What could you do in Iowa with our soils and our environment when Chad's getting that response there?
Yeah, almost a 20% response in a drought where it's 100 degrees and some pretty formidable conditions. All right, exactly. If I want to do this, I got to do this through where I get my dry fertilizer, right, Scott?
That is correct. Titan is impregnated on dry fertilizer. It's available through XtremeAg Solutions retail stores across your listening area, all across the U.S.
Do they get mad at you that you're actually reducing the amount of dry fertility that they sell because you're making it more utilizable?
No, but I can tell you it's for an organization that a substantial part of the business is selling fertilizer. It's the words, sometimes the answer isn't more fertilizer, are tough words to begin to say and socialize, but it's a fact. And again, as the industry changes and evolves, and Kelly's talked a lot about the sustainability angle, those are words we all need to become more comfortable with.
I agree. We're going to leave it there. Kelly Garrett, one of the original founders of XtremeAg. And by the way, if you want to learn more from guys like him about the sustainability stuff, you can become a member for just $750 a year. $750 a year, become an XtremeAg member. What's that get you? A direct access for a question and answer platform with guys like Kelly, Matt, Kevin, all of them, and ask them the questions that you might have to go a little deeper on something like, for instance, this, on how to get in sustainability programs, getting your carbon intensity score done, and how you can make money off of that. And also you get direct access to them. You get also special offers. You get to go to things like Commodity Classic the last 2 years. You also can get the data at the end of the year, all the trials that these guys do, then you get access to that as a member. So just look into it, $750 a year at XtremeAg.farm. So next time, share this with somebody who can benefit from it. And maybe this is the year that you start thinking a lot about utilization and sustainability, because you know what? Those dollars, they got to be spent a little bit more wisely and still keep you solvent. There's only one kind of sustainability for the environmentalist, but for you, the farmer, there's two kinds. Sustainability means solvent, so you can live to fight another day. Till next time, thanks for being here. That's Scott Lay with Agricen. Go and learn more at agricen.com, I assume?
Agricen.com or lovelandproducts.com.
Or lovelandproducts.com. Till next time, thanks for being here. And I'm Damian Mason with XtremeAg's Cutting the Curve.
That's a wrap for this episode of Cutting the Curve. Make sure to check out XtremeAg.farm for more great content to help you squeeze more profit out of your farming operation. Cutting the Curve is brought to you by Simon Innovations. Don't let your sprayer's limitations hold you back. Visit SimonInnovations.com and upgrade your sprayer's capabilities now.